Imagine being told your father died, and instead of comfort, you're handed a document that feels like a slap across the face. No love, no legacy. Just a cold declaration that everything you believed about him was a lie. That's how the nightmare began for three siblings, Malik, Eva, and Zoe, on a day that started like any other, but ended with their world cracking wide open. Let me take you there. In the heart of a busy city apartment, Miles sat hunched over his kitchen table. The room was small and plain, filled with the hum of a struggling fridge and the scribble of his pen. He worked for a local outreach program, helping young men stay off the streets. His life was quiet, structured, safe. But that safety shattered the moment his phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the red button. But something, a chill or a whisper in his gut, told him to answer. "Is this Miles Carter?" the voice asked, formal and flat. "Speaking. I'm Anthony Blake, legal representative at Blake & Rowe. I regret to inform you your father, Mr. Lionel Carter, passed away last week. We need you to attend a will reading." Miles blinked, his pen slipping from his hand. Lionel Carter. The man who raised him with hard rules and harder silences. The man he hadn't spoken to in almost 3 years. The words hung in the air like fog. His father was gone. There was a will. Within minutes, Miles had called his 2 sisters. Eva answered first. She was the middle child, always sharp, always questioning. In her 2nd year of law school, she rarely showed emotion, but Miles could hear the tension in her breath. You sure it's real?" she asked. The lawyer sounded legit. "Blake & Rowe. I'm coming. We need to see everything." Zoe, the youngest, picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was soft, confused. "Dad's dead?" "Yeah, they're reading the will tomorrow. You okay?" A pause. Then, "I don't know." Zoe was a painter, always a little removed, living in a bubble of colors and brushstrokes. She ran a small gallery in a quiet neighborhood and was the most emotionally open of the 3. They agreed to meet the next day. None of them knew that by walking into Blake & Rowe, they'd step into a storm of lies and betrayal. The law office sat on the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown, not far from the city's oldest library. The kind of place that smelled like expensive ink and old secrets. Miles arrived first, dressed in his best collared shirt and slacks. Eva came next, crisp and focused in a navy blazer. Zoe last wore a long flowing skirt splashed with blue paint she hadn't noticed. They were shown into a large room with leather chairs and a sweeping view of the skyline. The table in the center gleamed under bright lights. At its head sat Anthony Blake. He looked like he belonged in a courtroom drama-sharp suit, gray at the temples, and a voice smooth as syrup. "Thank you all for coming," he began, sliding a thick folder onto the table. "This contains your father's final wishes." Zoe looked down. Ava's jaw clenched. Miles sat still, a stone trying to stay calm. Blake opened the file, flipping through pages. "Your father's assets were unfortunately quite limited. A small insurance policy, some savings, but most of that will go to cover debts." Miles blinked. "Debts? What debts?" Eva leaned in. "What about the house?" "That was paid off." Blake gave a tight smile. "Actually, there was a second mortgage taken out. That, along with other obligations, leaves very little." Zoe's eyes shimmered. Eva shot Miles a look, her mind spinning. "Can we see the paperwork?" Eva asked. Her voice was cool, but Miles knew that tone. She didn't trust him. Blake hesitated just a second too long, then handed over a few stapled pages. Eva read fast. The documents were too simple, too vague. The will looked like a generic template. No lender was named for the alleged second mortgage. She frowned. Her father had been many things, distant, private, but he was never careless with money. Something was off. She said nothing, not yet. The silence after Blake's words hit like a thunderclap. even though his voice had been calm. "I'm sorry to deliver such difficult news," he had said, folding the papers as if they weren't explosive. Then he walked out, leaving behind a storm in a room that suddenly felt too large, too cold, and way too empty. Miles leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. His eyes were fixed on the spot where the lawyer had stood just moments before. "That doesn't make sense," he said slowly. "Dad always said the house was paid off. Every single cent. He was proud of that." Eva crossed her arms, her gaze hard and calculating. "He even showed me the paperwork once. No debt, no mortgage. Blake's story doesn't line up." Zoe, sitting quietly beside them, wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Maybe he was hiding it. Maybe something happened and he didn't want to worry us." But Eva shook her head. "No, he wasn't the type to hide that kind of thing. If anything, he would have wanted us to be prepared." The room fell silent again, but now the silence buzzed with tension and unspoken thoughts. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. That night, Eva sat hunched at her small writing desk, cluttered with textbooks, case briefs, and now a stack of copied documents from Blake and Rowe. The soft hum of jazz floated through the air from her iPhone speaker. She didn't even hear the notes anymore. Her focus was absolute. She read each page under the glow of her desk lamp, flipping and scanning like a seasoned investigator. Every word seemed to scratch at her nerves. There was mention of a second mortgage, but no details, no bank name, no reference number, no signature besides a vague witness stamp. That wasn't standard, that wasn't legal. And the will so thin, it could have been a draft. It had none of the formality her law professors drilled into her. Just a few sentences and a signature. She recognized as her father's, but something was missing. A lot was missing. Her mind drifted to a memory, a Sunday afternoon, years ago. She and her dad had sat outside, eating grilled plantains, talking about life. He'd said something then about making sure she and her siblings would never have to struggle. That he was working on setting things up right. That a friend of his, a lawyer, was helping him draft a will. That lawyer wasn't Anthony Blake. She flipped the will over again. No mention of farmland. Nothing about the Mississippi property her father had inherited from his parents. He'd talked about it once, sitting in his old armchair, eyes glinting with a rare bit of warmth. "That land's staying in the family," he had said. "It's not much, but it's something real. Yours when I'm gone." So where was it now? She opened her laptop. Her fingers moved fast. First stop, the Cook County Recorder of Deeds. She waited on hold for 20 minutes, then explained her request to a tired-sounding clerk. 10 more minutes passed before scanned documents landed in her inbox. She opened them with trembling fingers. There it was. The house in full ownership under Lionel Carter. No mortgage, no lien, clean title. Her breath caught. That was the proof she needed. Next, she checked Mississippi State Property Database. Her heart pounded. A match, 5 acres. Registered in her father's name. Still valid. Still untouched. She clutched the edge of her desk. So why wasn't any of this in the will? She picked up her phone and typed a message, hands moving before she fully processed the words. House is clear. No mortgage. Dad still owns land in Mississippi. Blake. Lead, Miles called seconds later. Say that again, he demanded. Ava spoke quickly, her voice low and controlled. I checked the official records. Everything Blake said was false. There's no debt. And Dad's land? Still his. Blake left it out on purpose. Miles let out a slow breath. So what now? Do we go back and call him out? Go to the police? Eva rubbed her temple. Not yet. We need to move carefully. Dad had a lawyer friend he trusted. I remember him saying that. Yeah, Miles said. He called him Big Bro. Real name's Edward Blackwell. I saw his name once in Dad's old address book. I might still have it. By afternoon, they were all gathered at Zoe's art studio. The walls were alive with half-finished canvases splashed with color. But the atmosphere was tense, still. Zoe had barely spoken, but her hands were busy wiping down paintbrushes that didn't need cleaning. Miles brought out the old, cracked leather address book. He laid it on the table and flipped carefully, page by page. "Here," he said, pointing. "Edward Blackwell, lawyer. There's a number, but it looks old. Try it," Eva urged. Miles dialed, putting the phone on speaker. One ring, two, then the click of a connection followed by a monotone voice. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Zoe exhaled slowly. Her shoulders sank. "No," Eva said, shaking her head. "That can't be it. We'll search him. He has to be out there. If anyone knows what Dad wanted, it's him." Miles closed the book and leaned back. "One thing's clear," he said. "Blake's lying. And if he lied about this, who knows what else he covered up." Zoe stared at the floor, then looked up, eyes filled with worry. "What if we can't find Greenfield?" Eva didn't blink. "Then we build the case ourselves. Every lie Blake told, every missing piece. We don't let Dad's name go down." Like this. Outside, the sky had turned dark. Rain tapped softly at the studio window. But inside, something had shifted. The siblings weren't just grieving anymore. They were preparing for battle. Undeterred, Eva pulled her laptop closer and started digging. She wasn't going to let a disconnected number stop her. After an hour of searching through online directories, legal networks, and archived references, she stumbled on a lead, a listing for a retired attorney named Edward Blackwell, living in Detroit. Her pulse quickened. She copied the number and hit dial. The phone rang once, twice. Then a voice picked up gravelly, cautious. "Hello?" Eva hesitated. "Mr. Greenfield? My name is Eva Carter. Lionel Carter was my father." Silence stretched across the line. Then the old voice softened, like snow melting off a rooftop. "My goodness, Lionel's daughter. How? Is your father?" Eva swallowed hard. "He passed away recently. We're going through his estate, and we believe something is very wrong with how his will was handled." She explained everything. The sudden news, the vague documents, the missing assets. A heavy sigh came through the phone. "Your father told me he was working with a law firm, Blake & Rowe, I believe. I offered to help, but he said he trusted them, said it was already in motion." Another pause. "Listen, Eva. Your father was careful, methodical. He wouldn't leave you kids out, especially not if that Mississippi land was still his. Something's off." Eva glanced at Miles and Zoe, who sat nearby, holding their breath. "Can you help us?" she asked. Edward coughed, then said, "I'm retired, but I still know people. And I think I have a file your dad sent it years ago. Give me some time. I'll call you back." Relief broke across Eva's face. For the first time in days, she didn't feel alone. But as she ended the call, a sense of urgency stirred in her gut. Because if they could find Edward Blackwell, so could Blake. And Blake, she feared, wouldn't let that happen without a fight. To keep busy, they decided to visit their father's house, the one Blake had claimed was worthless and mortgaged. The moment they arrived on the quiet south side street, their chests grew tight. The yard was overgrown, weeds pushing through sidewalk cracks. The mailbox was crammed with circulars, sympathy cards, and bills. But the place still smelled like home. Eva turned the key. The door groaned open. Inside, memories rushed in. The hallway still held the faint scent of his aftershave. The kitchen window let in golden light just like it always did. In the living room, dust settled over framed photos, and an old VHS copy of Coming to America sat beside the TV, one of their dad's favorites. Zoe whispered, "It feels so empty without him." Miles nodded, placing a hand on her shoulder. We're going to make this right. I don't know how yet, but we will. They explored the house slowly, ending in their father's old study. The room was small and crowded with books, old receipts, notebooks, and drawers full of God knows what. Eva moved to the desk and spotted a locked metal box. She tried the latch. No luck. Figures, she muttered. Dad loved his secrets. Miles started rifling through drawers. Zoe examined the bookshelf. Then, from between two dusty encyclopedias, Zoe gasped. Found something. She pulled out a thick folder stamped with the Blake and Rowe logo. Ava snatched it gently and began flipping through. It was dated 6 years ago. Inside were typed estate planning notes. They outlined a trust fund, a life insurance policy, detailed steps to protect the Mississippi land and ensure it would pass to his children. There were checklists, signatures, planning notes, no mention of debts, no second mortgage. Near the back, a handwritten sticky note. Blake promised everything would be handled as agreed. Finalized by next month. LC. Ava's heart thudded. He had a plan. A full one. And Blake either changed it ... or buried it. Her eyes darted to the metal box again. The real will could be in there. For the next hour, they tried every code they could think of. Birthdays, anniversaries, military ID numbers. No luck. Frustration mounted until Zoe sat down, thinking deeply. What was that verse Dad always quoted when things got hard? Eva snapped her fingers. John 14:2. In my Father's house, there are many rooms. Miles tried the code, 1402. Click, the box popped open. Inside was a sealed envelope. On the front, in their father's unmistakable handwriting, for my children only, they froze. Eva opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, a personal, heartfelt note. It spoke of love, regret, and deep pride. He explained how he never wanted to burden them, how every decision he made was for their security. He apologized for his silence after their mother died. Explained how he made sure the house, land, and a modest stock account would be theirs. At the bottom of the letter was a final instruction. Make sure Blake and Rowe follow the trust agreement. It's all in the documents. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Below the letter was a will, a different one. It listed the Mississippi farmland, the fully paid Philadelphia home, a brokerage account with a modest stock fund. It was signed by Lionel Carter and 2 witnesses. Ava felt her chest tighten. This is it, the real one. Zoe pressed the letter to her chest, eyes brimming with tears. He wanted to protect us. Miles paced the room, fists clenched. And Blake tried to steal it. Why? Ava looked up, her voice firm. We find out. But not until we call Greenfield. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. But inside, they finally had the truth in their hands. What they didn't know was that Blake was already a step ahead. And he wasn't going to give up without a fight. 2 days later, Edward Blackwell's reply landed in Ava's inbox. The email was brief, but the information inside sent a chill down her spine. Blake and Rowe, Edward had discovered, had recently entered into a quiet partnership with a private developer, a company notorious for buying up undervalued homes in predominantly black neighborhoods, homes like the one her father had worked his whole life to protect. The pieces clicked together too well. Blake had doctored the will, erased key assets, and made it appear as if Lionel Carter died with debts hanging over his name. The goal? Force a sale to their partners. Pick up the house and farmland for a fraction of their worth. Funnel the proceeds elsewhere. Everyone eats except the rightful heirs. Shaken but fueled by anger, Ava gathered everything they had. The letter, the true will, the folder from years ago. That afternoon, she, Malik, and Zoe returned to Blake and Rowe, walking into the same polished conference room that had once robbed them of their inheritance. But this time, they came with fire in their hearts. Blake greeted them with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad you came back," he said, tone syrupy. "I have a few updates to share regarding the estate." Ava didn't sit. She slid a folder across the table. "We have updates too," she said flatly. "Like why the real will was never disclosed." Blake blinked, then slowly opened the folder. His eyes moved over the documents. A flicker of surprise, maybe even panic, crossed his face, but it vanished behind a rehearsed calm. "These are old drafts," he said coolly. "Probably something your father considered before updating his plans," Miles scoffed. "These are dated more recently than the trash you tried to pass off as final." Blake's tone sharpened. "You've been rummaging through confidential materials. That's dangerous territory without legal representation." Ava stepped forward. "I'm in law school. I've studied enough to recognize fraud when I see it. This document is legally binding, 2 witnesses notarized. It includes the land in Mississippi, the house in Philadelphia, a brokerage account. All left to us," Zoe added quietly. "He wrote us a letter." He said it all, in his own words. Blake's jaw worked. He set the papers down and leaned forward. "You must understand, your father changed his mind. The final version is the one I provided. Maybe he gave you this older one out of sentiment. But legally, it means nothing." Ava's voice turned cold. "We pulled county records. There is no second mortgage. The land title is clean. The will you gave us? A lie." Blake's face reddened, but he held his poise. "Are you accusing me of lying?" Miles leaned in. "That's exactly what we're doing. And we're taking this public." Ava didn't stop there. "We already spoke with an attorney willing to represent us pro bono. If we file an ethics complaint, you could lose your license." Silence tightened the room like a noose. Blake stared at them for several seconds, then said in a low, chilling voice, "Take my advice. Drop this. There's nothing here for you. If you stir the pot, you'll only hurt yourselves. Blake and Rowe has powerful friends. You won't win." Ava met his stare. "We'll see." They gathered their papers and left. In the hallway, Ava's hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were steady. "He's bluffing," she whispered. "But he's dangerous." Back at Ava's apartment, the 3 siblings spread everything out: the original will, the estate plan, the sticky notes, and their father's letter. Edward Blackwell joined via video call. His face was older than the photo Eva remembered, creased with time, but his eyes were razor sharp. "This isn't just about your father," he said after reviewing the documents. "This is a pattern. I've heard whispers about Blake and Rowe for years. Predatory acquisitions, forged paperwork. They target families that don't have the resources to fight back." He looked at Eva. "They didn't expect you to dig." Eva frowned. "So what now?" "How do we stop him?" Edward leaned closer. "We go to court. It won't be quick or easy. But I still have some fight left. And I've tangled with Blake before. He won't want me across the aisle." Miles sighed. "Lawsuits are expensive. They'll try to drain us. We can't afford to fight them forever." Edward nodded solemnly. "They might try. But here's the thing. You have truth on your side. And if we prove fraud, Blake could face disbarment. Maybe even criminal charges. That's pressure they can't ignore." Zoe wrung her hands. "Can't we just submit the real will and walk away? Register it ourselves?" Edward shook his head. "Unfortunately, we need a judge to rule which will is valid. And Blake won't go down quietly. He'll contest it in probate." Eva exhaled. The mountain loomed, but at least now they had a guide. "We have the real documents, the letter, and your experience. What we're missing are the 2 witnesses who signed Dad's will." Edward nodded. "Find them, and you seal the case." Before ending the call, he gave one last warning. "Watch your backs. Blake and Rowe doesn't fight fair. I've seen them use intimidation, slander, even threats. Don't let them scare you off. Ava clicked the laptop closed and stared at the wall. For the first time, her grief began to shift into resolve. Lionel Carter had raised them to stand up for what was right. And that's exactly what they were going to do. The search for the two witnesses listed on their father's will became the siblings' next mission. Ava stared at the names written in neat ink: Helen Brooks and Gerald Knox. Neither rang a bell. A quick online search revealed a handful of Helen Brookses in Philadelphia and several Gerald Knox. It felt like chasing shadows. Eva exhaled loudly, her shoulders slumping. Zoe, ever the voice of calm, offered, "Let's split it up. You handle Regina. Miles can track down Terrence. I'll help both of you dig." And so began a week of voicemail greetings, unanswered texts, and doors opened by confused strangers. The trail grew cold quickly, but Eva refused to lose hope. Then, finally, she caught a break. She dialed a number from a business directory, and a tired woman's voice answered. "Helen Brooks?" "Yes, who is this?" Eva steadied her breath. "My name is Eva Carter. I believe you witnessed a legal document for my father, Lionel Carter." There was a long pause. Then, "Oh my goodness, I remember him. He was so kind. Always had a joke ready. Yes, I think I did witness something for him years ago. Must have been 4 or 5 years." Ava's heart pounded. "We have that will. But Blake claims our father changed everything and left us nothing." Helen laughed bitterly. "Typical Blake, always finding ways to bend things. I used to work at Blake and Rowe, not proud of it. I left after I realized how often we were asked to sign off on things that didn't feel right. I'll testify. Anything to expose what's happening there." Eva nearly cried in relief. She arranged a meeting for the following day. Meanwhile, Miles struck gold too. He located Gerald Knox, a notary who once worked freelance for several firms, including Blake and Rowe. Gerald was traveling but agreed to speak by phone. "I notarized a lot of things for them," he said. "Lionel Carter's name sounds familiar, but I'd need to check my logs to be sure. Still, I can confirm I did validate documents during that time frame. If you send me a copy, I can compare my stamp." Not perfect confirmation, but close enough. When Eva shared the updates with Edward Blackwell, he beamed through the video. "Call. Perfect. If Helen can testify to witnessing the will and Gerald can corroborate the notary stamp, we can move forward with a formal challenge. This gives us serious weight in court." Fueled by new momentum, the siblings told Edward to proceed. He filed the necessary paperwork at the Cook County Probate Court, including a motion for an emergency injunction to stop Blake and Rowe from moving on any of Lionel Carter's assets. The court granted their request. Blake and Rowe received official notice. A hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks, but celebration was short-lived. Ava couldn't shake the image of Blake's cold stare. He had power. He had money. And if he was willing to forge legal documents, what else might he do to protect himself? Days passed like a slow storm building. Each sibling returned to their routines, but nothing felt normal. Miles continued mentoring at the nonprofit. Zoe poured herself into her paintings, and Eva split her time between classes and case prep. Then one evening, Ava's phone rang. No caller ID. She hesitated, answered. A raspy voice slithered through the line. "Back off, or you'll regret it." Ava's heart stopped. "Who is this?" she demanded. Click, the line went dead. Her hands trembled. That wasn't a prank. The timing was too precise. She immediately messaged Miles and Zoe. "Be careful. I just got threatened." Miles insisted on calling the police, but with no proof, Ava wasn't hopeful. That night, she barely slept. Every creak outside her window felt like a warning. The shadows no longer felt still. Meanwhile, Blake began his smear campaign. Rumors spread among colleagues, neighbors, and old family friends. Whispered claims that the Carter siblings had abandoned their father, that they were money-hungry, that they didn't deserve a penny. Zoe was crushed when a gallery visitor subtly questioned her integrity. Miles heard a board member at work ask if he was the guy suing his own father's lawyer. Edward Blackwell offered steady words over video call. This is his strategy: discredit. You isolate, you wear you down, don't bite. Let the evidence speak in court. Ava nodded, jaw clenched. She threw herself into preparation, organizing documents, creating timelines, cross-referencing every entry. She coached her siblings on how to handle questions, what to expect. Zoe painted portraits of their father in the evenings, each one more expressive than the last. Her grief flowed through her brush. Miles meditated each morning, grounding himself in calm and clarity. And then the day arrived. The sky was gray, the wind bit through their coats. Cook County Courthouse loomed large and silent. Inside, marble floors echoed with every footstep. Ava walked beside Edward Blackwell, who moved slowly but radiated quiet authority. Helen Brooks followed behind, nerves tight in her smile. In the courtroom, Blake sat at the opposite table, flanked by two attorneys from his firm. He wore his usual crisp suit, smug and composed. But Eva saw something else in his eyes now, the flicker of fear. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair and a voice like iron, opened the session. Edward rose. He presented their case clearly. The legitimate will had been withheld. Blake forged a false version. They had the real one, witness testimony, and official records to prove it. Silence blanketed the courtroom like fog as Helen Brooks stepped forward. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the oath, but her eyes remained steady. I worked as a legal secretary for Blake and Rowe when Mr. Carter came in to sign his will. She began, her voice calm but clear. I was present in the room. Gerald Knox, the notary, was there too. We both witnessed the signing. She paused, then continued. Mr. Blake pulled me aside later and told me not to mention any land in Mississippi if anyone ever asked. He said, "We'll sort out the Mississippi land separately." It was strange, but at the time, I didn't question him. Whispers broke out in the courtroom. Blake's face flushed crimson as he leaned in, urgently whispering to his attorneys. When it was time for cross-examination, Blake's lawyer rose. "Ms. Morris, you left the firm shortly after. Is it fair to say you have a grudge against Mr. Blake?" Helen didn't flinch. "I left because I didn't want to work somewhere that twisted the law to benefit the powerful. I'm here today to speak the truth." Her words landed like iron. Even the judge nodded slightly. Next came a sworn affidavit from Gerald Knox. Though he wasn't in court, his notarized letter confirmed he had verified Lionel Carter's will. It named the house, the land, and a stock portfolio. Fields noted that he never saw any mention of debts or a second mortgage. The judge turned to Blake. "Do you deny that this version of the will exists?" Blake adjusted his tie. "Your Honor, I may have misinterpreted certain documents. It's possible older drafts were mixed in. A clerical oversight, nothing more." Ava's stomach churned. It was a weak defense, and everyone knew it. Edward Blackwell stood once more. "We also submit a handwritten letter from Mr. Carter to his children, clearly expressing his intent to leave all assets in their hands. He even references our firm by name and asks that we ensure his wishes are carried out." He handed over county records confirming the land in Mississippi was still registered under Lionel's name. The judge examined the papers carefully. Then, peering over her glasses, she asked, "Mr. Blake, why were these properties and documents excluded from your original submission to the court?" Blake stuttered. "We believed we were acting in good faith. These discrepancies were accidental." The judge's eyes narrowed. "If I determine otherwise, this court will refer your actions for disciplinary review." Just when it seemed The worst was over. Blake's lead attorney stood. We moved to dismiss Ms. Morris's testimony on grounds of bias and personal conflict. The judge frowned. I see no grounds to discredit her testimony. Motion denied. A beat of silence passed. Edward approached the bench once more. We respectfully request the court recognize the valid will of Lionel Carter and immediately name Eva, Malik, and Zoe Carter as the rightful heirs. We also ask for a freeze on all assets pending formal resolution. The judge nodded. I will take this under advisement. A written ruling will be issued in due course. As they exited the courtroom, Eva caught a chilling look from Blake. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark with rage. Outside, the wind cut through their coats, but they had walked out stronger. In the following weeks, Eva tried to concentrate on her coursework, but tension lingered like a shadow. Miles kept his hands full at the nonprofit. Zoe spent long nights painting, her emotions spilling across the canvas. Edward tried to keep them focused. The judge's questions, her reactions. That's the sound of doubt creeping into Blake's defense. But Blake didn't rest. Whispers surfaced that he was trying to push a silent deal on the Mississippi land. David, ever vigilant, filed an emergency motion in the Mississippi court system. The response was swift, a temporary injunction. No transactions would be allowed. Then came the harassment. A letter arrived at Eva's doorstep. No name, no return address. Just venomous words typed in bold. Ungrateful, greedy, you'll get what you deserve. A dark SUV began appearing near her apartment. Same car, different days, always parked across the street. She filed a police report, but without evidence, there was little they could do. Then one night, a call came through. Blocked number. Against her instincts, Eva picked up. You think you're smart? Playing detective? Blake's voice was unmistakable. You don't understand how this works. Drop the case, and maybe you'll get to keep a sliver of that land. Eva's voice was steady. Threaten me again, and I'll make sure every word is recorded and handed to the court. She hung up. Miles rushed into the room, awakened by the tension. Eva recounted everything. They called David, who advised them to stay alert. Blake is unraveling. When men like him lose control, they lash out. But that's also when we're closest to victory. 4 weeks passed. Then came the summons. The judge's decision was ready. Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The judge's voice rang out clearly. After reviewing the presented testimony, signed affidavits, and authenticated documents, the court concludes that the will dated 4 years ago is the valid and enforceable last testament of Lionel Carter. Gasps echoed. The estate, including the property in Philadelphia, the farmland in Mississippi, and the referenced assets, shall be granted to Eva, Malik, and Zoe Carter. Tears filled Eva's eyes. Zoe clutched her hand. Miles bowed his head. The judge continued. Furthermore, due to evidence suggesting misconduct, this court refers Mr. Blake to the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission for investigation. Blake's complexion drained. His lawyers erupted in whispered protests. The judge slammed her gavel. Court is adjourned. Outside, the siblings stood together on the courthouse steps, clutching the official documents that affirmed their father's wishes. Blake passed by, venom in his glare. You'll regret this. Before Eva could answer, Edward stepped in. That's enough. You lost. Keep your distance, or you'll lose more. As Blake retreated, the siblings turned to one another, breathing deep. They had not only won the case, they had reclaimed their father's name, his promise, and their future. It was a victory, but Eva knew better than to let her guard down. Men like Blake didn't fold easily. He might appeal, or worse find another angle to manipulate. But for now, the siblings allowed themselves to breathe. Over the following weeks, Blake's reputation began to crumble like dry clay. The state's disciplinary board officially launched an ethics probe. And once the news hit local headlines, a floodgate opened. Former clients started speaking up. Stories surfaced: missing deeds, phantom debts, forged paperwork. The press dubbed it the Blake and Rowe property scheme. Eva read every headline with disbelief. Miles uncovered a forum thread filled with anonymous users recounting their own stories about Blake. Half the firm's clients withdrew in just 30 days. The shady developer in Mississippi quietly cut ties, claiming ignorance of Blake's misconduct. The once feared attorney now stood alone. The SUV that used to linger outside Ava's place? Gone. The harassing calls? Silent. It seemed Blake was too busy trying to salvage his career to keep intimidating them. Meanwhile, life moved forward. Ava and Miles worked to complete the estate transfer. All documents were filed, the Mississippi farmland legally registered in their names. Zoe, with her artist's heart, had a vision. Let's keep the Philadelphia house. Turn it into something beautiful. A creative haven. Maybe even a community space, something Dad would have loved. Miles agreed immediately. We could give back to the neighborhood that shaped us, make it matter. They debated selling the farmland, but Eva had a different idea. Let's visit it first, walk the land, understand what Dad saw in it, then we decide. Weeks later, they packed into a rental car and headed south. The drive to Greenville, Mississippi, was long but filled with reflection. They played old music their father loved, shared memories, laughed, cried. When they finally arrived, the land stretched before them, 5 acres of gentle hills, wildflowers, and scattered trees. The air was warm and sweet with the scent of honeysuckle. Zoe took photographs, each frame, catching something magical: the play of light through branches, the hum of nature untouched. Miles walked the perimeter, already brainstorming ideas. A small farm, maybe a retreat space for youth programs. Eva stood still in the middle of the field, eyes closed, feeling the wind. They had almost lost all of this. Her father's legacy. Their family's future. That afternoon, they held a quiet ceremony, just the 3 of them. Ava read aloud from their father's letter. Each of them scattered a handful of wildflower seeds, letting them fall like soft prayers into the soil. They weren't just heirs, they were caretakers now. A month later, Eva opened an email from Edward with the subject, "Final outcome." Blake had been officially disbarred. The charge: conduct involving fraud, deceit, and intentional misrepresentation. He now faced potential criminal prosecution. Blake and Rowe was no more. The partners were under review. The story caught fire. Media outlets ran exposes, focusing on how Blake targeted vulnerable Black families. Advocacy groups demanded broader investigations into real estate corruption. Ava watched news clips of people stepping forward, inspired by their case. Elderly couples, single mothers, entire families who had been taken advantage of, now finding the courage to speak up. The siblings felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. Nothing could bring their father back, but at least his truth had been restored. Miles and Eva spent evenings sorting through old letters, planning next steps. Zoe turned her emotions into art. A vivid series titled Found Legacies. It portrayed families breaking through darkness with color and strength. Each canvas was a declaration. Their father had taught them to fight quietly but firmly. Now they were building not just for themselves, but for others like them. Sometimes, the most powerful battles aren't fought in the streets or on screens, but in hushed courtrooms and over kitchen tables. This one started with a lie and ended in truth. Eva, Malik, and Zoe Carter didn't just inherit land or property. They inherited purpose. Never underestimate the power of truth, family, and persistence. Even when the odds are stacked and the lies are deep, justice can still rise. Fight for what's right, even when it's quiet, slow, and hard. Because in the end, it's worth everything. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Let others know the truth always finds its way. And if you're holding on to your own battle, don't let go. You're not alone.